Hi, I'm Wesley Allison, author of the book series The Sorceress and the Dragon. The Sorceress and the Dragon tells the story of a group of adventurers who start a new colony in an unexplored, mysterious land. It's set in a world very much like our own Victorian age with the addition of magic. Today I'd like to do a reading from book 9 in the series, The Dragon's Choice. One of the characters in The Dragon's Choice is Zoantheria, the title character. She is a dragon who, as the title suggests, has a choice to make, whether she wants to live her life in the form of a human being or as a dragon. So without further ado, The Dragon's Choice, Chapter 1, Zoe and Augie. It was a warm spring day in Bermesia Colony, and the people of Port de Chantain were making the most of it. The parks were full of families watching children play football or eating picnic lunches. Several practice cricket matches were being played, with more than a few spectators. Outdoor cafes were full, and there was a concert scheduled in the downtown amphitheater for later that day. Many strolled along the sidewalk rather than taking a car. However, one young couple was driving their steam-powered carriage northward into the warehouse district on the peninsula. Both looked to be about 20 years old. Both were dressed in expensive and fashionable clothing, his a sharp gray suit with a red waistcoat, and hers a creamy peach day dress trimmed with lace. "I thought we were going to the concert," said the young woman. She ran a hand over her blonde hair that spilled down to her shoulders from beneath the peach tri-cornered hat perched atop her head. "We are," he replied, steering to the curb of 7th and 1/2 Avenue. "I was just checking on something first." Engaging the parking brake, he hopped out of the vehicle, running around back to open the relief cock. A loud whistle of steam escaped the pipe. "I'll be right back," he said, peeling off his driving gloves and tossing them into his seat. Then he stepped quickly down the street some 20 feet and disappeared into the narrow space between two warehouses. His destination was a locked door near the rear of the leftmost building, and he was busy fishing the key from his pocket so he didn't notice the two men coming from the other direction. One was a shorter man with a thick chest and muscular arms. He was bald and wore an eye patch. The other was a huge fellow, towering over the young man's 6-foot height, with a huge mop of blond hair that half obscured his face. "We'll be taking your wallet," said the shorter of the two. The well-dressed young man looked up, startled. "Now see here." His words were cut off when the giant slammed a fist into his stomach. He doubled over, looking up with wide eyes. His expression was not one of fear, but of shock, as if it was simply inconceivable that someone would lay hands on him. He was helpless as the one-eyed man reached into his breast pocket and pulled out his wallet. "We'll take that watch, too." "No," the young man tried to say. The giant took him by the shoulders and slammed him against the wall of the building. The one-eyed man grabbed his watch by its chain and yanked it from his pocket. One brass button shot off his waistcoat and bounced off the neighboring building's wall. "Don't feel bad, boy," said the thief. "It's all part of growing up." The two stepped back behind the building and were gone. The young man struggled to take a couple of deep breaths. Then he rose to his feet to find a young woman next to him. "Are you all right?" she asked. He shook his head. His eyes brimmed over with angry tears. "I'll be right back," she said. "No," he said, but she was already gone. "Kafira, damn it all," he growled, punching the corrugated tin wall of the warehouse, leaving a fist-size indentation. Then he took several more deep breaths, carefully straightened his jacket, and bent down to brush the dirt off his trousers. His bowler hat fell off and rolled several feet away. He retrieved it and brushed it off too. When he stood up straight once again, she was back. "How are you?" she asked. "How am I supposed to be?" he said, wiping away a stray tear from his face. "I've been emasculated twice in one day." "Hardly emasculated. There were two of them, and they were no doubt seasoned criminals." "Once by them and once by you," he accused. "Me? What did I do?" "You tell me. What did you do?" "I just taught them the error of her ways." She held out her hand, holding his wallet and watch. "Here, don't be upset, Augie. You are a very powerful man." "Not the right kind of powerful in this case. I shouldn't need my woman to fight my battles for me." "I'm not your woman." "You're supposed to be." "What I mean to say is, I'm not a woman. I am what I am, and when somebody harms someone I love, well, they must die. It's as simple as that. This is my father's watch, he said, placing it back in his pocket. I dare say no one ever took it from him. You shouldn't let this bother you. I'm going to hire a boxing coach. You don't need a boxing coach, she said. I doubt your father had one. He just acted instead of thinking about it. You're not a fighter. You're a thinker. Now don't look at me that way. I didn't mean it as a rebuke. Thinking is your strength. Use it to your advantage. How? Hiring a bodyguard? You don't need a bodyguard, she gave him a toothy grin. You have me. They're dead then? By now. Eaten by marine reptiles or drowned. I dropped them out in the bay. He said. Did I hear you say you loved me? You might have. I thought you just loved my money. Make no mistake, I love your money too. She placed her hands on either side of his face and kissed him deeply. I love you too, Zoe. Let's go on to the concert. Don't you want to check on whatever you were going to check? No, I really don't need to. Come on. Oh, all right. He found the key and unlocked the warehouse door, opening it for her. I was going to surprise you with this next week. What is it? She stepped inside. It's a new car, a cherry red Bromsfeld 10. Ooh, it looks expensive. It was, very. I love it. Sometime later. Augie leaned over and kissed Zoe on the corner of her mouth. Then he hopped out of the car and hurried around to help her out. She put one hand on his shoulder and kept his face in the other. Are you feeling better now? Concerts always make me feel better. You know what I mean. I'll survive, he said. That is, I'll survive if you agree to have dinner with me tomorrow. You'll manage to go more than 24 hours without me? She stuck out her lower lip. I guess I'm not all that desirable after all. I won't be without you, he said. You'll be right here the whole time. He pointed at his head, and then he put his hand over his heart, and right here. She kissed him on the cheek, and then leaned over and bit his ear. You make me feel all squishy inside, she whispered. She giggled as his face turned bright red, and then skipped away to the front door. She watched him climb back into his car, and then went inside. Passing through the foyer into the parlor, she twirled around on a toe and laughed aloud. Her spin took her a little more than 360 degrees, and her laugh stopped abruptly when she found herself facing Senta, who had been, up until now, unobserved in the corner chair. Zoantheria. Senta Bly, in addition to being the world's most powerful sorceress, was Zoe's mistress, almost like a mother, having looked after her since she had hatched. She stood and stepped forward. The two looked enough alike to be sisters, though Zoantheria's appearance was the result of magic. What have you been doing, pet? I was at the concert, replied Zoe. You were with that boy again. He was at the concert, too, with me. And Augie's not a boy. He's a man. She smiled. He's a very, very handsome man, and he's wonderful. He's so nice, and he's nice to me. And he's rich, said Senta. And he's very, very rich, purred Zoe. He's a handsome, rich man, and you are a dragon. What does that have to do with anything? Does being a dragon mean I can't be happy? It means that someday your young Lord Augustus Merrick Virgil de Chantaine will find a nice girl and marry her, and it won't be you because you are a dragon. I know I'm a dragon. Quit throwing that in my face. I act like a dragon all the time. Why, just a few hours ago I killed 2 people. Taking care of criminals is a job for the police, said Senta with a dismissive wave, not befitting of a goddess. You were spying on me? Don't flatter yourself. I had to do some divination magic. I was getting a pimple. The sorceress stepped close and draped her arm around the dragon in human form. You've been trying so hard to live like a human. You're not eating right. You've only slept here and there in the last 2 weeks. You can't keep that up. I'll sleep for a week or 2, said Zoe, after tomorrow evening. I have a dinner date with Augie. At least go get a proper meal. I don't want you to accidentally eat your young man. Yes, you're right, of course. The two walked through the dining room and out the door into the garden. Senta stood watching with arms crossed as Zoe released the magic that held her in human form. Suddenly she filled the garden The size of a locomotive engine, even with her wings held in, the dragon was covered in metallic scales that reflected a pinkish coral color in the sunlight. Her head alone, larger than she had been as a woman, was covered with spiky horns, and long whiskers hung down around her mouth. "You're much more beautiful this way," said Cinta. Zoe blew a smoke ring out of her right nostril. Then suddenly she was gone, shot into the sky, seemingly with no effort. For a second she made a streak across the sky like lightning, and then she was gone. Cinta sighed and then turned and went back inside. The seas around the continent of Malon were extremely dangerous, filled with a whole encyclopedia of deadly creatures, from small poisonous invertebrates to large carnivorous fish, saltwater crocodiles, and dozens of types of sharks. The dominant species of the entire underwater world here, though, were the Dinosaurs. Typically 30 to 35 feet long and weighing in at around 11 tons, they were built like a crocodile, with an especially large mouth and flippers instead of legs. They feasted on giant fish, sharks, and other marine reptiles, and they did so with alacrity. On this particular day, in the waters some 4 miles northeast of the city of Port-de-Chantain, one Kronosaur had just finished feasting on a 20-foot-long Crotoxyrhina shark, and now floated near the surface to take in the warmth of the sun. The Crotoxyrhina shark was no small prey, especially a fully grown one, but this particular Kronosaur was the king of its undersea world, 43 feet long and half again as heavy as the others of its kind that hid when it slid through the water. Now it rolled up back onto its back and lifted its flippers into the sunshine. It was at that moment that it was hit by an object shooting down from the sky like a meteor. The force pushed the great beast down into the depths. It didn't feel the claws grabbing hold of it and pulling it back to the surface. The kinetic energy of the collision had killed it. The coral dragon lifted the Kronosaur to the surface. It was far too heavy to carry up in the air, so she flew toward land, dragging it through the water. Reaching the water's edge, she heaved it up onto the rocky shore and began to feast. She tore off huge hunks of the carcass, chewing them through the meat, fat, skin, and bones without regard to the blood coating her face and neck. Seemingly of its own accord, her long, barbed tail wove a complex pattern through the air, warning away any potential scavengers. Thus, as the bass takes the minnow, so does the pike take the bass. So Antheria looked around for the source of the deep voice. There seemed to be no one there. Then she noticed a bright crimson cardinal perched on the branch of a dead pine tree. "Am I supposed to be the pike in this little allegory?" she asked. "Maybe I'm the pike and you're the bass. Watch your tone with me, child." "Yes, my lord." "You stink like a human." She shrugged. "Why are you here, my lord, in that disguise?" "I woke up, and my slaves told me that you hadn't been to see me the entire year that I had been asleep. That will not do. You can't spend all of your time cavorting with humans. It's unbecoming of a goddess." "Funny. You know, she said the exact same thing to me earlier today." The coral dragon paused, took another bite of her kill, and then continued. "Ah, that's why you're here, not as yourself. She might see you." "Foolish female. Human spellcasters cannot scry a dragon." "She can. She did it to me earlier." "What do I care?" asked the bird, but he tilted his head to look around. "I've eaten her like for breakfast. Literally." "You know, she knows that spell. She could be any random sparrow." "I'll deal with her, but on my own timetable. Of course, I might not even have to. Perhaps she'll do it for me. She has no idea what to do with her own power. She throws it around with wild abandon. It's like watching a monkey with a gun." "So, I didn't visit you," said Zoe. "What exactly do you want from me?" "I want you." "You what now?" "You shall become my mate, Zoantheria, the first that I have taken in a dozen centuries. That whelp shall not have you." "What whelp?" "The god of the sky." "Bessemer? He doesn't want me, I can assure you of that. He has absolutely no interest in me, certainly not a romantic interest." "Romance," he spat. "It's going to take a century just to wring out the human ideas contaminating you. Of course he wants you. Who wouldn't want the goddess of the sea?" "I'm not a goddess," said Zoe. "I'm just a dragon." They are one and the same, said the bright bird. I shall expect a visit from you within a fortnight, Zoantheria. You must pay your respects to your future lord and master. The cardinal flitted up on way to the southeast. Yes, my lord Voindrazius, said Zoe. Then she turned back to the Chronosaur and sliced down its belly with her razor-sharp claws. The top half of a massive shark slid from its open stomach and out onto the rocky ground. Yum, shark. Some time later. Zoe skipped down the steps from the front door and into Augie Deschantain's arms. Her bright new purple dress was trimmed with black fur cuffs and a collar. The black top hat didn't hide her new hairstyle of cascading golden ringlets. Shall we go? She asked, after giving him a kiss and a squeeze. Wait, let me look at you. There's something different about you. Her smile slipped a bit. I know what it is. You're even more beautiful than you were yesterday. Are you hungry? Famished, she said, grinning. He helped her into the car and then hurried around to the driver's side. A moment later, they were shooting down the red brick street. It had already passed 7. The sun was only just setting, and it was still quite warm. Sliding over to the center of the seat, she took Augie's arm and leaned over, putting her head onto his shoulder. They stopped across the street from Cafe Etta. After stepping down, Zoe took her companion's arm once again, and together they hurried across the busy thoroughfare. Cafe Etta was busy, and there was a line of waiting diners, but Augie led her to the front, expecting to be seated immediately, which they were. The Mirsan and host led them to a table just left of the center of the dining room. Cafe Etta featured open-air dining, though it had a hardwood floor. It was surrounded by a waist-high banister above which were hung colorful lights. A member of the restaurant staff was even now lighting them with a match at the end of a long pole. The host first pulled out Zoe's chair for her, and then Augie's. Are we celebrating tonight, your lordship? Of course, replied Augie. I'm celebrating being out with this lovely creature. Bring us a bottle of your second most expensive sparkling wine. Odd phrase, that, said Zoe, once the host had left. Lovely creature. Well, you objected yesterday when I called you a woman. True. Call me but love, and I shall be transformed into whatever you wish. You're perfect already. What would you like to eat? Lobster? A waiter arrived with the sparkling wine and 2 flutes. After popping the cork, he poured the 2 glasses. Would you care to hear the specials? No need, said Augie. 2 lobsters with all the accompaniments. Very good, sir. The waiter hurried off. You really are a lovely creature. Thank you, kind sir. A lot of people are here out to dinner, he said, glancing past her. I see the Crawfords, and your cousin and his wife over there. Geert and Honor, I mean, not the annoying ones. You mean Senta's cousins. They're not really mine. Of course, I forgot. But still, Senta's like your mother. Speaking of mothers, yours is sitting near the railing behind you. Really? Yes, your grandfather and grandmother, too. The whole family, then. I suppose I'll have to go and talk to them, but for now I'll just pretend that I don't know they're there. Your mother is looking right at me. She knows we're talking about her. I don't think she likes me. Of course she doesn't. She's my mother. She thinks you're not good enough for her little boy. How can she think that? I'm a dragon. You can't do any better as... What? Nothing, she said. I'm being silly. Go say hello. Augie got up, turned around, and strolled across the room to the table where Mrs. Deschantain was seated, along with Mr. and Mrs. Corlon. He was only there for a moment before his mother stood up and guided him into her chair. Then she walked over and sat down across from Zoe. Mrs. Deschantain was still a strikingly beautiful woman at 47, with full lips, chocolate-colored eyes, and dark brown hair lightly streaked with gray piled high on her head. What are you playing at, monster? She hissed. Hey, replied Zoe with a frown. Hurtful words. What are you doing with my boy? Lord Deschantain is a man, and I'm an inhuman monster. Wow. Creature, monster, goddess, everyone certainly has me pegged. I'm less interested in what you are than what you want, said Mrs. Deschantain, like my son's money. Augie is so very much more to me than money, said Zoe, but she couldn't help smiling as the word money passed her lips. Good evening, Ewa, Zoe. A figure suddenly stood beside the table. Honor McCourt leaned down and kissed first Mrs. Deschantain on the cheek and then Zoe. Mrs. McCourt was a few years younger than Augie's mother, without the bit of gray in her dark brown hair. She was pretty, but had a scar running from her cheekbone to her chin. Her white blouse and black skirt looked very plain next to Mrs. Deschampaigne's fuchsia evening gown. "We already said good evening not 20 minutes ago," Mrs. Deschampagne told her. "What is it that you want now?" "Well, my intentions are twofold," said Mrs. McCourt, looking up at the colorful canvas that acted as a ceiling. "First of all, as you are both my friends, I'm here to try to limit any animosity. Secondly, if Zoantheria were to transform into a dragon in order to eat you, my dear husband would be right where her tail would fall." "I've never eaten a person," said Zoe, "as far as either of you know." "Oh, this is an over-monster," said Mrs. Deschampagne, getting up. "Of that I am certain," said Zoe. "You really are a kibitzer," said Mrs. Deschampagne to Mrs. McCourt, though it was said without any real venom. She turned and walked back to her table. "Good evening, Zoe," said Mrs. McCourt, turning to leave. "Good evening. My best to your husband." "So what did my mother want?" asked Augie, returning to his seat, just as the two waiters arrived with trays filled with 2 bright red lobsters, roasted vegetables, cheeses, and breads. "Oh, nothing really. A bit of local gossip." "Oh." He cut a piece of lobster tail and dipped it in drawn butter before bringing it to his mouth. "I'm afraid I won't see you for a while," said Zoe. He stopped his second forkful of seafood in midair. "Why?" "First I have to sleep, but then I shall be away." "For how long?" "A few weeks, perhaps a month at most." "A month? Whatever will I do without you?" he asked. "Is this because of something my mother said? If she's bothering you, I can do something. I can send her away on holiday. I'll send her to visit my sister in Breck City." No, it's nothing to do with your mother," said Zoe. "It's some dragon business. You know, something you have to do for Senta?" "One might suppose, yes." "I shall miss you terribly." "Good. See that you do. And see that you don't take up with any young females." "Well, as long as you're not gone longer than a month," he said. "After all, you know I am a very sought-after young bachelor. There are plenty of fetching young women who would like to be showered with expensive gifts." "As long as you make them aware of the potential risk for those rewards." She picked up her lobster, twisted it in 2 pieces, and then brought the top half to her lips, sucking out the green, fatty paste from inside. "I like a woman with a good appetite," said her dinner companion. "Then you are in luck, Lord Deschampagne," she said. "You have no idea." Thank you for joining me for this reading of The Dragon's Choice, part of the Sorceress and the Dragon series. If you're interested in these books, they are available in ebook form wherever you buy ebooks. That is Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple Books, etc. Or you can visit my website at wesleyallison.com. Thanks again. Thanks for your support. Bye-bye.